Picture a kid setting the table for two instead of three, and never once thinking it's strange. Picture a teenager who knows how to read a room before they even walk into it, who can sense a shift in someone's mood before a single word is spoken. Now, here's the assumption most people carry around, that growing up with a single mother means growing up with a little less structure, less security, less of something. But the psychological reality is a lot more interesting than that, and honestly, a lot more human. Because what actually gets built inside a person raised this way isn't a deficit, it's a different architecture entirely. And once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere. Let's start with the thing nobody talks about: hyperattunement. Kids raised by a single parent, especially a single mother juggling work and home and everything in between, often become fluent in something psychologists call emotional labor absorption. They learn without ever being taught to read exhaustion in a sigh, to recognize the difference between "I'm fine" and "I'm fine." Researcher Ellen Galinsky's work on children of working parents found that kids in these households often develop advanced perspective-taking skills earlier than their peers, simply because they had to. There was no second adult to buffer the household's stress, so the child's brain adapted by becoming a kind of emotional radar. You didn't choose this. Your nervous system just did what nervous systems do best. It adapted to the environment it was actually in, not the one it was supposed to have. And here's where it gets fascinating. That same radar that made you hyper-aware of your mother's stress levels as a kid, it doesn't switch off when you grow up. It becomes the way you love people. You notice when a friend's texts get shorter. You catch the tiny hesitation before someone says, "I'm okay." You've probably been called intense or too observant by people who've never had to survive on emotional information the way you did. But that's not intensity. That's a skill you built in the school of necessity, the same way a kid who grows up near the ocean just knows how to read the tide. Now let's talk about independence, because this is where the story gets a little more complicated and a little more tender. Psychologist Jeffrey Arnett's research on early self-reliance shows that children who take on responsibility earlier, whether that's making dinner, watching a younger sibling, or just managing their own homework because mom's still at work, often develop what's called pseudo-adulthood. You look competent, you act competent, people assume you've always had it together. But underneath that competence, there's sometimes a quieter question that never really goes away. If I stop being capable, will someone still want me around? That's not weakness. That's just the residue of a childhood where being needed and being loved got tangled together a little early. And once you can name that tangle, you can start to gently pull it apart. Here's a metaphor that might help. Think of a tree growing on a windy cliffside versus one growing in a sheltered garden. The garden tree grows tall and straight because nothing ever really challenges it. The cliffside tree grows differently. Its roots dig deeper. Its trunk bends in ways that would snap a garden tree. But that bending is exactly what keeps it standing. Botanists actually have a term for this: thigmomorphogenesis, the way plants physically restructure themselves in response to mechanical stress. You are, in a very real sense, a cliffside tree. You didn't grow the way you did despite the wind. You grew that way because of it. There's also something worth saying about the mothers themselves, because this psychology isn't just about the child, it's about the relationship. Single mothers often model something researchers call resilient scaffolding, a term used to describe caregivers who, despite limited resources, consistently provide warmth and structure even under strain. Studies out of the University of Michigan tracking single-parent households found that the presence of even one consistently warm, responsive caregiver was more predictive of a child's emotional stability than household income or family structure itself. Let that sink in for a second. It was never about the number of parents in the house. It was about the quality of connection with the one who was there. If your mother showed up, even tired, even stretched thin, even imperfect, some part of your nervous system learned that people can be depended on even when life is hard. That's not a small thing. That's actually the foundation most therapists spend years trying to help people build. Of course, there's a flip side worth naming honestly. Some of you grew up fast in ways that left gaps, maybe a tendency to overfunction in relationships, maybe a hard time asking for help because you learned early that help wasn't always available. That's real, and it deserves acknowledgement, rather than a tidy bow. Growth doesn't mean pretending the hard parts were secretly gifts all along. It means recognizing the patterns clearly enough that you get to choose which ones you keep. So here's the reframe. You're not someone who grew up with less. You're someone who grew up decoding, adapting, and holding things together with a kind of quiet strength that people who had it easier will genuinely never have to develop. The watchfulness, the independence, the depth, none of that was a malfunction. It was your mind doing exactly what minds are built to do, making sense of the world it was actually given. If any of this felt a little too familiar, a little too close to home, I'd love to know. Drop a comment about what you noticed in yourself while watching this, and if you want more of these deep dives into the psychology hiding inside your everyday life, stick around because we're just getting started.